Hi, everyone, and welcome to Unlocking Data Context to Deliver Cyber Resilience. Today's webinar is sponsored by Rubrik and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Keith Ward. I am with Actual Tech Media, and I am so pumped to be your moderator for today's special event. But before we get there, I need to cover some basic housekeeping stuff for you. First of all, we encourage your questions. Just drop them in the questions box in your webinar control panel over there on your right. That's also where you let us know where you are today. We love knowing where you're logging in from, so keep letting us know. I've seen a bunch of you come online already. Keep those comments coming. Now, if you can't hear something or see something, if anything goes wrong, that Q&A box is also where you want to go after you do a couple of browser refreshes. So first thing you want to do is give your browser a refresh. That usually fixes things. If it doesn't, well, give it another refresh. Sometimes it takes a couple of refreshes. If that doesn't work, head back over to the Q&A box. Let us know, and we'll hop on and try to help you out. All right. Next up, right next to that Q&A tab is the Handouts tab, which has some important free resources for you. I'd especially like to call your attention today to two links from Rubrik. One is to an introduction of its cyber resilience program, and the other is a PDF on the state of data security and how to measure your data's risk. Does that sound good to you? It certainly does to me. So download those now. Check them out. A lot of great value in that. In the handouts section, you'll also find a link to the ATM Events Center, which has our calendar of more upcoming events just like this one. Check them out. You know, we've got a lot of good stuff coming up in December, which we're right at the beginning of, and sign up today for any sessions that look really good to you. Okay, finally, at the end of the event today, we're going to be making one of you $250 richer courtesy of that Amazon gift card. You do have to be in attendance during the entire live event to qualify for the prize, the official terms and conditions of which can be found in that handout section. You'll find all the mind-numbingly boring details right there. And with that, folks, I'm about done with my little intro. Let's get to the main event here. What do you say, huh? It is my pleasure to introduce you to Zoltan Diak. We have had Zoltan on before. He is always excellent. He is a director of product marketing for Rubrik. He is ready to go. So Zoltan, you are up, sir. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Zoltan Diak, and I work on our security capabilities here at Rubrik. And today I'm here to talk about how you can turn your IT data into security insights. So what exactly does that mean? Well, most people would talk about it as taking data and signal from different systems in your IT and security environment and correlating those signals to detect and prevent threats. That's pretty bread and butter stuff for a security team, right? But most organizations are missing signal and intelligence from a crucial part of their IT infrastructure that can help them not only do a better job detecting threats, but become more cyber resilient. So not just preventing threats, but responding faster, minimizing the damage of successful attacks, and recovering faster. And we're going to talk about that overlooked signal today. But before we do, let me take a quick step back with some context. At Rubrik, our mission is to secure the world's data. So everything we think about is through that lens. We think about data as the crown jewels of any organization today. And securing data is more important now than ever, of course, but that is incredibly challenging. Your data is growing faster than ever. It's growing across on-prem, cloud, and SaaS environments at record rates. Requirements for transparency of sensitive data breaches is increasing too. And so are the fines behind them, as governments are trying to push private industry to invest more in securing their customers' private data. And the number of attacks targeting data is increasing along with those things, as adversaries very much understand Your organization's data is the most valuable asset you have. So attackers very well understand that going after your data is going to be very financially rewarding for them. And so we've thrown a lot at this problem, haven't we? I have a lot of conversations with customers about their data, specifically about protecting and securing that data. And the conversations almost always start off with preventing threats. How can I detect and prevent more threats faster across this ever expanding IT landscape with adversaries that are becoming more and more sophisticated and attacks that are coming at greater volumes than ever? And it's a really great conversation to have. We talk about different systems that organizations are implementing to secure their on-prem, cloud, or SaaS environments, and different strategies and frameworks those companies are utilizing to prevent those threats. At some point, those conversations always turn towards the types of signals these organizations are using to detect threats and how they're correlating those signals to figure out if an attack is happening, what that attack looks like, and who's doing the attacking. A typical enterprise organization tends to run somewhere between 50 to 75 different security tools with this in mind, right? So they're trying to cover off on everywhere they might be attacked. And I love looking at the kill chain as a framework for these types of discussions because it really helps us understand and break down different things around how defense in depth works. How should it work, right? The idea behind defense in depth is let's break down a cyber attack into different phases and find a means to identify signal and use it to disrupt every single phase of these attacks, right? So great. Across the kill chain today, we use all these different tools across reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control. And I always ask the question, which of these tools is about defending your data specifically? All of these tools are about detecting and preventing unauthorized access to your infrastructure. But there's nothing that really gives you any sort of actionable intelligence for when your high value data is under attack. If you're going to argue DLP, when was the last time your DLP told you what sensitive data or regulated data in your environment was there and where is it located? There's nothing that has a sense of where that data is or who has access to it. And when you look at the last stage, impact or action from objective, literally where the bad guys land, lay hands on your data, encrypt it, steal it, destroy it, whatever the case might be, there's virtually nothing in terms of capabilities you can use to prevent or disrupt that last stage. Where's your signal when someone is threatening your sensitive data? And, the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of successful attacks leverage compromised legitimate credentials in some way, shape, or form, right? Over 80% of cyber attacks use identity-based techniques. Virtually any cyber attack today involves stolen credentials, compromised identities, stolen access tokens, API keys, whatever it might be, right? Either for the initial access or for lateral movement. So how do you actually stop something if you don't have any IOCs, any file hashes, any IPS signatures, and so forth? So when attackers, get in, they're bypassing all your layers of defense in depth to access your data, right? All those systems heavily focused on securing your infrastructure. Cloud infrastructure security, network security, endpoint security, and then what happens to your data? We see these capabilities getting bypassed day in and day out, right? They're just logging in after they compromise credentials. And after they bypass your infrastructure security, they virtually have free access to data, the stuff that hurts us the most, the stuff we're really trying to protect. And we need to start thinking about data security from a data perspective. We need to start with data, understanding our data, because we can't defend it if we don't understand it. So, with all that, how do we understand the data we're protecting? How do we pull signal from it and turn that signal into actionable insights? In all my years working in cybersecurity, I have to admit, I never really thought about backups. I knew they were there to fall back to in the event of an attack, but that's all I really thought of them as. A very important insurance policy in case data was compromised. And maybe in the past, that's all they really were. But modern backup and recovery systems host a wealth of potential intelligence about your data that can help you protect it. So Rubrik first made a name for itself, revolutionizing that enterprise data protection space. And we did a lot, and we continue to do a lot to revolutionize that space. One of the ways we did this was by bringing data and metadata together. What I mean by that is when we take a backup snapshot, we're actually scanning the data we're backing up so that we learn a whole lot of interesting things about that data. In other words, we have a whole lot of context about the data that we're protecting. And when our customers started coming to us and saying, hey, we love your backup and data protection, but the whole reason we back up our data is to be able to recover that data if something happens to it. And of course, one of the primary threats to data in today's world is cyber attacks. So we quickly realized, hey, there's a whole lot of value to that data context that can help our customers before, during, and after a cyber attack. So what is that context? We're able to tell you where your data is stored. May sound simple, right? But in today's world, data stored on-prem, multiple cloud environments, SaaS applications, and it's growing to a point where a typical organization is going to add, over 150 million sensitive data records in the next 5 years. So all of that's really, really hard to track. What type of data is it? What's in it? Is it sensitive data, PII, regulated data? How's that data changing over time? Who has access to that data, and how is that access changing over time? Right? All that's really useful insight that we provide through our data protection capabilities. So it's actually insight and signal you should already have within your network that you may not be taking advantage of today. And it comes from a source that people don't really think about, your enterprise backup. So you can turn that signal into actionable intelligence and correlate it with your security tools. So let's talk about how to use that signal. So first of all, I want to stop focusing just on prevention. When we think about data security, it's about managing risk and working towards cyber resilience, because threats are going to get through your infrastructure security. And at Rubrik, we think about what we can do, again, before, during, and after an attack to maintain resiliency that will help us the most when it comes to that data. So before an attack, there are things you can do to reduce your overall level of data exposure. That includes things like right-sizing who has access to data, so implementing least privileged access, removing redundant, obsolete, or trivial data, and of course, ensuring you're backing up everything that matters into an immutable backup. The less you have exposed, the less damaging if you're breached, right? During an attack, it's all about being able to detect threats in your data that may have gotten past your perimeter. If something's gotten in, you may already have damage, but if you can detect them before they've managed to exfiltrate a large volume of data or moved further laterally, you're minimizing the impact. And finally, after an attack, of course, you want to be able to recover as quickly and safely as possible. If we can do these three things well, we can lower our overall risk and increase our cyber resilience. So this is going deeper and focusing on the data itself. So let's drill into each one of these things a bit. So let's start with, of course, before an attack happens. I mentioned earlier, securing data is about managing risk. And risk starts with understanding that risk because, of course, you can't defend what you don't understand. So you have to do some really good discovery to understand what data you're responsible for. Because every asset of data that's in your environment, you are ultimately responsible for. And then you've got to get rid of all the stuff that doesn't serve the business purpose. So that's really the first step. Understand what you still use in your business processes, right? That's really the second step. If you have regulated data assets around that are like 3, 4, 5 years old, do you need them on a live system? If the answer is no, archive it. Remove it from live systems because if it's sitting there, it's still introducing risk. If it gets out, you still face regulatory fines. And that's what makes you pay a ransom, right? Step 3, make sure the right people have access to the data, but not everybody. Um, I know at first this may sound like, man, now you're talking about zero trust for data. I firmly believe we'll never reach that nirvana state. But we can start simpler. It's not an all or nothing thing. Simple steps to use as a starting point. So, for example, if you're in the United States, in California, employee records fall under CCPA. Let's say you find yourself in a situation where the PII of your employees is accessible to everyone in the company. That's a ton of risk, right? But how many people work in HR? Maybe 3% of your employees? So let's just say you only reduce access to people in HR. That reduced the risk from a CCPA perspective to those PII records by 97%. Hey, that's significant. And it's pretty easy to do. It's a starting point. And of course, you always want to make sure you have an immutable backup for the data that truly matters. I think it's about in 96% of ransomware attacks, we're seeing attackers go directly after the backups, right? They know this is your ultimate life insurance and they're specifically targeting it, so you'll be forced to pay their ransom. Rubrik's data discovery and classification capabilities can really help you reduce sensitive data exposure, manage exfiltration risk by discovering what type of sensitive data you have and where it lives. We also have the ability to understand who has access to this data so you can more easily implement least privilege access. And we're providing this capability through our enterprise backup solution, which means we're doing this without introducing additional scanners on your network in a production environment. We're scanning backup snapshots, which also means we're able to track all of your sensitive data and access to that sensitive data over time, right? So all of this super powerful signal you can turn into actionable intelligence. All right. So let's move on to what about during an attack? What happens if what I spoke about earlier comes true, right? Unfortunately, your infrastructure defenses have been bypassed, and now you have malicious files in your network that are poised to attack your data. At that point, you've already been compromised, right? So ransomware or other attacks may be laying dormant. conducting reconnaissance, moving laterally, or even beginning to encrypt data. Having a last line of defense to scan for these activities is pretty critical. Again, with the focus on your data. We want to scan for IOCs, of course, but there are also indicators in your data itself. Is your sensitive data being encrypted or duplicated? Is that data being downloaded? Is access to sensitive data expanding in an abnormal way? And we want to focus on the data that truly matters, right? That sensitive or regulated data that's going to cripple your business or threaten your customers or result in significant regulatory fines. So constantly monitoring for these things over time will help tip you off as to whether an attack is happening so you can respond faster to contain the threat and minimize potential damage. So Rubrik provides anomaly detection, threat monitoring, and threat hunting capabilities to help you accomplish all of these things really quickly and without putting additional load on your production environment. Threat monitoring is our proactive, always-on capability that scans your backups for threats. It utilizes threat intelligence feeds from Rubrik Zero Labs, Google Mandiant, and other third-party sources to automatically scan your backups for the latest IOCs. So think of it as constant vigilance that you can set and forget. Threat hunting is our surgical tool. You can use it to scan for specific IOCs. It's the fastest in the business with a proprietary architecture that allows us to scan thousands of backup images in seconds. Imagine your industry has been recently victimized by a specific threat, and the board calls wanting to know if you've been impacted. So threat hunting gives you the power to search using hashes or Yara rules so you can determine if you're infected. And if you are infected, you can determine when that infection occurred so you can recover as quickly and safely as possible without reinfecting the environment. So I'm getting ahead of myself. We're getting into now what happens after an attack. So when it comes to recovering from a cyber attack, every second counts, right? The faster you can recover, the less your business is impacted. Good news is we generally know the things we need to accomplish to be able to recover. We need to understand what data was compromised. We need to know when that data was compromised so we can understand what a safe recovery point is. So Rubrik's tools allow you to quickly identify those things and identify and quarantine any malicious files so we can prevent reinfection when we restore. And of course, we handle the orchestration of actually restoring clean data and systems. So Rubrik's data remediation capabilities are going to allow you then to surgically and rapidly recover your apps, your files, or your objects while avoiding malware reinfection. So you can safely, at any scale and granularity, quarantine infected data, restore impacted apps, files, or objects, and orchestrate recovery of applications. So this is, again, all made possible by the fact that we get this data context, this signal from your backup snapshots. So all this data context you already have in your enterprise backup can be turned into intelligence that helps you achieve greater cyber resilience. And on its own, it's really powerful, right? Like I just demonstrated 3 different phases where this type of context can add significant value. But we also thought, well, what if we worked with other security vendors who don't have this type of insight, this type of data context, this type of insight into the data that they're protecting. If you think about a traditional cybersecurity vendor, they're generally very focused on prevention and they utilize threat intelligence, right? Whether we're talking about network security, cloud security, endpoint security, they generally have tremendous insight into threats so they can identify when an attack is happening and stop that attack. They have insight into, IOCs, TTPs, vulnerabilities, threat actor profiles, but they don't have any understanding of the data they're protecting. They can't because they don't have anything scanning the data itself. So we thought, what if we could combine Rubrik's data context with that type of threat intelligence? That would give a much more holistic view into an attack and the target of those attacks. So customers would be even better equipped to defend themselves. Let's take an example. Let's say a security event is logged into CrowdStrike XDR. And what we see is some unusual network traffic around a particular IP address or VM, right? On its own, that alert might be alarming, but might be missed or not given a high priority by a SOC analyst because they're sorting through hundreds of other alerts in their queue. Consider the same scenario, but we add rich Rubrik data context, all the context I just described, delivered directly into CrowdStrike XDR. Now the SOC analyst can quickly see that the target IP address contains sensitive data records that have been classified as high or medium risk. Maybe it's personally identifiable patient records. Data that would be particularly harmful if it's compromised and likely subject to regulatory fines, right? Suddenly, this event takes on much more importance because we understand not only the threat, but the significance of the target of that threat. So this event is actually an incident that should be highly prioritized immediately, potentially isolating that compromised endpoint and shutting down traffic to and from the IP address. And then more detailed forensic analysis should be applied to determine if the data was accessed or compromised, and if so, when it occurred and how severe the impact was. At that point, it's all about streamlining remediation and recovery, right? So by combining our data context with threat intelligence, we can enable security analysts to more quickly prioritize attacks on their data by understanding if there is suspicious activity surrounding that sensitive data. So we're empowering them to be able to respond faster, preventing a threat or containing the damage. Defenders need that threat context from their security tools combined with data context. So signal and information on what is being targeted. They can't understand the true risk without understanding if an attack is targeting high value data and whether it was an isolated or targeted event. So without context, it's much harder to prioritize and take action against potential threats to data. And so we've delivered a series of integrations across SOAR, SIM, XDR, and other security tools to bring that data context directly into those tools. And CrowdStrike XDR, great example of this, right? So by combining Rubrik data context with threat intelligence, that really delivers these actionable insights into threats and the target of those threats in one place to help security personnel respond more quickly to those high priority attacks and ultimately achieve greater cyber resiliency. So these capabilities are all critical components of any modern defense in-depth kind of strategy today, right? We know with the growth of enterprise data and how valuable it is, it's the primary target of attackers. We know attackers are going to get through. So we need to be able to ensure that we're as resilient as possible in the face of successful attacks on data. And Rubrik really gives you additional value through what you already have in your enterprise backups. We give you that additional signal that no one else can give you, insight and actionable intelligence to help you defend what attackers are targeting, your high value data. And we extend that signal into your security tools so you can correlate it with your threat intelligence in one location. All this is available through our natively built tools in the Rubrik Security Cloud without the need to deploy and manage agents in a production environment. Rubrik is there for the entire data lifecycle, right? From the time data is stored and backed up to the time it could be potentially breached. Rubrik's really the only platform that offers cyber recovery and cyber posture for enabling cyber resilience under one umbrella without the need for third parties. All right, so that's all my time for today. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope you got some value out of it. And if you have any questions or want to learn more, join us at Rubrik.com. Thank you. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you, Zoltan. Wow, what a fantastic presentation. Was I right, folks? Zoltan always comes out with great stuff. So much learning, so much innovation, always from Rubrik. They push the envelope on what's possible, and I always appreciate that about them. So, folks, that's about it for today. Right now, I do have one more duty to take care of, as you can see right there, and that is to give away that $250 Amazon gift card. As I mentioned at the beginning, you have to be present for the entire event to win here on an Actual Tech Media event. And the winner of the gift card for today's session is Steve Brungart from Kansas. Congratulations to you, Steve-O. We will be in touch ASAP to get you your card, so sit tight. And with that, folks, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I really want to thank Rubrik for making this event possible. And thanks, as always, to you attendees for being here, for your great questions, for your interest in this topic. And there were some terrific questions that came in. I did want to mention that Rubrik will not be able to take questions today, but we'll be following up. So you will be hearing from them if you did ask a question. And with that, I'm going to get to the rest of my day. I encourage you to do the same. I can't wait to see you in the next event, folks. That's a wrap for right now. Have a great rest of your day.